Welcome back, everyone. In this video we're going to do a quick follow-up to the structural steel video where we didn't actually find any structural steel to populate onto this report, but there's some really useful lessons and kind of tips that we can discuss here just by adding a few elements of steel so that we can just kind of walk through and discuss how it gets reported. So the first thing I want to discuss and to mention is we have in the object tool, we have under our 05 metals, we have these structural steel beams and columns that we can essentially place and use. So I'm just going to grab a random W column. We can go through here and we just want to make sure, just go through and kind of re-specify our settings here that this is a column. Uncheck that one. We don't necessarily need that one. And I'm just picking up the latest settings from our other objects here. So I'm just going to reassign this real quick. So we're going to, this will be structural metal framing. 05, 10, 10 steel columns is what we'll call this. And typically this will be on a floor construction and upper floor construction. Oh, gotta go way up here. Upper floor construction. Okay, so typically here we'll price steel based off tonnage and weight. So kind of a round number that we can apply is $3,500 per ton, and that's fabricated and installed. And so that gives us a kind of a starting point for pricing these. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to hit OK, and we can just right now, what's this default? It's on the home story. So let's just kind of go down here and we'll just toss in a random column so that we have at least one column that we can report with. We'll just uncheck our surface. Now let's check, I just want to check a few more settings here. So we do have materials and surfaces, and in this case I'm definitely going to assign this to our metal iron, and I don't care too much about these other properties right now, but let's just we'll leave that as is. And so now we have a structural iron column. So based off that, let's go back here now to our structural metal framing and kind of see what's happening here. So we have that column, its element ID is just set as object. We didn't rename that just yet, but we have these profiles and weights here that are not currently being populated. And as I mentioned in the previous video, these are actually coming through based off an IFC property. So in this case, we actually need to add the IFC property mapping to this project in order to get those to actually calculate. So let's go ahead and do that real quickly. And we'll do that by going into our interoperability, IFC, and then our IFC translators is where we need to start. So right now you'll notice that there's only a few translators in this example project, and what we want to do is we just want to essentially import the property mapping here, because if we go into here we can see that we're still on the old one, ARCHICAD 20, and we can go in here and we can map IFC properties for export. But the problem here is we don't have the custom setup mapping for those steel objects. So that's what we want to do right now. And we're going to do this by actually going to our, right now we're in our property mapping scheme here. So we can access this by going to our IFC translators. Whichever one is active is the one that will have the little ARCHICAD symbol next to it. And if we go to our property mapping, we can come in here and we want to import. And in this case, I know where I've exported it and saved it. It's going to be under our products, C5D, settings, IFC translators, and we just need to look for that XML file, and it's this ContraBIM property mapping 22 is what we are looking for. So let's open this up, and based off this we can go into our settings on this one. And so we'll notice here, if we go in, we can actually see that we have this 3DC structural steel set up, and then underneath here we have these predefined rules that essentially goes in and maps for the columns and the beams. It will go in and map, in this case we're looking at the length, but for our profile here, this is going to map the profiles. And it's also, what's really important here is it's also going to map the weight. Okay, so this is really important. This is really powerful because this will actually go in, and this is our best opportunity for really extracting a lot of data out of individual objects, because we can create these by just creating new rules. Oh, I want to cancel that. So we can create, and we actually can't do it on this level. We need to do it on the level up above here where we actually have the option for creating these. So if we wanted, we could create a new rule, and then we can add content by going into add parameters and properties, library part, parameters, or static text. So we can go in here, and this will pull up our opportunities to go into our libraries. And so we could do this for MEP elements, which is powerful. We can do this for library parts. And so that's essentially where we got to these values, is by going all the way in here and then essentially adding the ones that we needed for, in this case, the weight, pounds per linear foot. So okay, I'm going to delete that. We're just going to hit OK. And so now when we exit out of this and hit OK, we want to just make sure that we are now using, in this case, the ContraBIM property mapping 22. And so we just assign that. And now when we hit OK, this should automatically be setting up this project where we're going to have our active IFC translator be able to go in and export, or to essentially list the properties associated with this. So we can check this real quick by going in here and going down to our classifications and properties. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, that's where we will find our IFC properties, and we can see that our length, our profile, and our weight is all being calculated. The W10 by 12, that means that it's a 10-inch, from web to web, and 12 pounds per square foot. So it's not surprising that we have 12 pounds per linear foot is how that's being calculated. So, okay, so that's good. We can add this. I'm sure we have a column here for structural columns, or a layer for structural columns. We can reassign that if we wanted. And so now the last thing we want to do is just go back and check that those are being translated through onto our report, which they are. So now we have our profile and our weight. And so based off this, we could actually come in here if we wanted to give it like a quantity factor. We could add, like, by making that 1.1, we're adding a 10% waste factor if we wanted to add in connections that way, just as a standard factor. So let's go ahead, and now that we've done this, let's just publish this out. And we can go back to our report here for structural metal framing, and let's just refresh. And okay, so this is telling us here that we have and let's just see here, our source quantity. So let's just kind of run through these formulas here, because these are a little bit more complicated than most, but let's just check it out. So our unit cost is, obviously most of these are just getting pulled over from this side. Our unit cost is 3,500. Our units is ton. And so our source quantity, we want to just check here. So first of all, we have this S11 up front multiplying by any of these things, which means that S11 is our quantity factor. So that's where we're adding that waste factor in. It's just right on the front end here. But if it's ton and it's an object, then we are going to essentially be we're substituting W11, which is our length, so that's 10 feet, multiplied by P11, which is our weight. So we're taking our length times our weight, and we're dividing that by 2,000. Sorry, what's U11? U11 is our quantity. Yeah, so we need our quantity in there also, because we could have multiple of these at the same time, and because these are objects, it's not going to automatically tally our length in this case. So we need we need our length, and that's what we're substituting out, is that foot marker. We need our weight, which is that IFC property, and then we need our count for those so that we get the right counts. And then we're dividing that in this case by 2,000 to get our tonnage. So for that one single column that we added, we can see that that's our tonnage. That's being converted to ton in this case. And so based off our price per ton, that's a $231 column that we have there. So yeah, that's kind of the general workflow of using these objects. We have other methods here as well, where if we draw, say, with like other non-objects, element types like slabs, then we can just take our volume multiplied by our weight per volume up here. So that's what these elements are for, or these fields are for, is this is calculating based off the pounds per inch, converting that to feet, converting that to cubic yards, because that's how we're essentially calculating volume on this project. So that's another way of getting there. And then of course, if it's just based off length, then we're just substituting the length. So that's a linear footage pricing. And if it's based off count, then we're just doing it that way. If it's based off area, then we're doing it in another way. So actually that one there, if H11 equals area, I see this one, instead of being W11, needs to be AA11. So that's just one that needs to be cleaned up, because these change over time. So okay, so there we go. This will still show a value here because it's still applying this formula to these values over here. So because in this case there's nothing there to tell it, it's just gonna give us an error, but that's fine. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully this was kind of eye-opening in terms of how we can use IFC data for extracting info out of these specific objects. What we might want to do here is, for our description, instead of being our element ID, maybe we rename that, but maybe we just kind of push this over and pick up that one instead. That's a little better. W10 by 12. And maybe we actually, something that might be even better would be, no, that's fine. I'm good with it. Okay, there we go. So that kind of walks you through how we can extract structural steel framing members onto this report. And I just wanted to walk through this because these are important calculations that if you're doing a structural steel building, then obviously you want to be able to get this to work in your own workflow. So, okay, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video. We are going to be taking a look at metal joists in the AMT plus C5D example project.